It has been an extended period since anyone has laid eyes on Jack and Lily Sullivan. An excessive amount of time has elapsed since there was a genuine update. There are no new leads, no significant breakthroughs, merely silence. This silence is the kind that feels unnatural, as if something is being concealed or, even worse, forgotten. Observe the available footage, the explanatory video. Peruse the headlines. Listen to one another recount the story repeatedly in an attempt to make sense of it all. We strive to feel as though we are contributing in some way. This situation transcends a mere case. It involves two children, two lives that have disappeared without a trace, and we will not relent. Even when the system decelerates, even when official channels fall silent, there remain individuals who are vigilant, individuals who care, individuals who harbor hope, not for headlines, not for closure, but for a possibility, however minuscule, that Jack and Lily will return home. Thus, we continue to converse, we continue to share, we continue to show up, for that is what they rightfully deserve. A life, justice, and a fundamental human right, the tapes. The inquiry into the disappearance of Lily and Jack Sullivan has encountered persistent criticism. From the outset, the RCMP has faced accusations of acting too slowly, communicating too little, and perhaps most concerning, overlooking too much. Individuals have scrutinized their decisions. Why was the search scaled back so swiftly? Why has there not been a release of more information? Why has there not been a single public suspect? To many, it appears that the case has grown cold, not because it ought to, but because someone allowed it to. However, something unexpected emerged. A few fragments of dispatch audio, quietly recorded during those initial hours, began to appear. Whether leaked or reconstructed, we may never ascertain, but what they disclose is remarkable. For behind the silence, there may have been a strategy. Beneath the calm suspicion, on rare occasions, we are privy to what the RCMP might have been contemplating, not in front of a camera but over the radio when they presumed no one was eavesdropping. Time is of the essence in a missing child case. The instant a child vanishes, the clock transforms into your adversary. Each passing second diminishes the likelihood of recovery. When Lily and Jack informed the police that the last time they heard from the children was around 8 a.m. on the morning of May 2nd, one would anticipate that the 911 call would be made almost immediately. However, that was not the case. The call did not occur until nearly 10:30 or 11 a.m., resulting in a delay of 2 to 3 full hours. In any case of disappearance, this is not a trivial oversight, it is a significant red flag. In law enforcement, this type of delay is referred to as the dead window. This is the critical period during which prompt action can be the determining factor between life and death, between recovering a child or losing them indefinitely. Most children who are found safe are located within the first 3 hours, which underscores the importance and suspicion surrounding this time gap. What were the adults in that residence doing during this interval? Were they searching, hesitating, or concealing something? This is a question that the RCMP appeared to contemplate early in the investigation, as the dispatch audio reveals something unsettling almost immediately. The directive was clear: ensure that the mother remains close to the house in case the children manage to sneak out and return. This was not a casual remark, it was one of the initial instructions given by the police on the scene, issued prior to the mobilization of full search teams. The focus was not on logistics but rather on containment, which alters the entire operation's tone. It indicates that the RCMP did not perceive this as a standard missing persons report. They approached it as potentially criminal from the outset. The mother lacks a phone reception, but she does possess a photograph of the two children. The 6-year-old is the girl, I believe, dressed in pink, while the 4-year-old is wearing blue dinosaur boots. That seems to be all the information we have at this moment. One can discern it in their voices. The officers maintained a calm and professional demeanor, yet there was no sense of urgency. There was no frantic energy or wide-eyed rush to inundate the woods with boots and dogs. Instead, their tone was clipped, measured, and focused not on the forest but on the individuals inside the house. This represents a conscious shift in approach. The behavior observed is typical when law enforcement suspects that the information received in a call may not be entirely accurate. It is important to highlight that the dispatch did not indicate who made the 911 call. However, based on the immediate actions taken by the officer, it is reasonable to deduce that the call originated from someone within the residence, likely a parent or partner. Nevertheless, the RCMP acted swiftly to restrict that individual's movement instead of depending on their account. This approach deviates from the standard protocol typically followed in cases involving a missing child. This indicates an investigative instinct at play. Therefore, we must inquire about what could not be disclosed publicly. Why were officers instructed to keep the mother in place so promptly? What observations led them to believe she should not depart? Did her narrative seem inconsistent? Was there something about the situation that felt amiss? Currently, we do not have answers. However, what is clear is that from the outset, the RCMP had suspicions that this case did not commence with the call they received. It began hours earlier, and someone within that household may possess crucial information. When authorities first arrived at 1407 Garlock Road on the morning of May 2nd, they were not merely responding to a report of a missing person. They were entering what would soon evolve into one of the most intricate and physically demanding search areas in Nova Scotia's recent history. This residence, situated deep within Landone Station in Pictou County, was officially designated as the last known location of 6-year-old Lily and 4-year-old Jack Sullivan. However, the surrounding landscape was not one where young children would typically wander far. The residents were located in a densely wooded rural region characterized by steep inclines, thick forest cover, and unpredictable terrain, making even the simplest search efforts perilous. From the outset, it was evident that this would not be a conventional missing child case. Various agencies, including the Department of Natural Resources, Air Services, Nova Scotia Public Safety and Field Communications, Nova Scotia Guard, Joint Rescue Coordination Centre, Salvation Army, the Canada Heavy Urban Search and Rescue Task Force 5, and multiple RCMP units, including police, were involved in the response. Dog services and drone operators. Since Saturday, we treat all missing person cases as suspicious until our investigation allows us to conclude otherwise. Our major crimes unit has been actively involved. This has been a comprehensive effort, utilizing every available resource and tool. Since the search commenced on May 2nd, it has focused on the Garlock Road area, covering 4 square kilometers of densely wooded rural terrain. The terrain has been characterized by searchers as heavily wooded rural land with narrow gullies, soggy lowlands, and the remnants of hurricane damage. Fallen trees from Hurricane Fiona years ago, referred to as deadfalls, obstructed trails, and impeded movement significantly. Some areas were nearly impossible to navigate. Several searchers became so fatigued that they required extraction from the woods for medical reasons, including muscle cramps and dehydration. In spite of these physical obstacles, the search effort was extensive. Teams employed drones, including thermal drones, helicopters, police dogs, and GPS, assisted grid patterns. Volunteers and professionals collaborated, sweeping cabins, crawling through creeks, and scouring even nearby bodies of water. With dive teams and boats, nothing was left to chance. Trail cameras were also located and examined with authorities, contacting owners for any potential footage. Multiple high-interest areas were identified. A cabin situated just 1 house away from the Sullivan property was cleared. Another SUV was observed near a cabin by a lake with individuals seen approaching it. This was also investigated. Investigators examined a gated driveway lined with reflective posts, dirt paths behind the house, culverts, and even nearby campgrounds like the KA, which locals assisted in monitoring. A trail camera was discovered on a nearby road and reviewed for any clues. To prevent overlapping air traffic, ground and aerial units coordinated closely. Drone pilots agreed to remain on the east side of the property while helicopter crews operated over other sectors. 1. Team radioed. Therefore, for the sake of deconfliction, I'll remain on the east side of the road. If you were going to stay on the west side of the road and work the backyards and over the top of the residence. If you are not planning to cross the road, we will simply drop down. There is a gully on the east side. We want to navigate through the forest there. Yes, we can proceed with that. Meanwhile, another individual added, yes, now you all can proceed with your tasks and we will focus on working in these heavily wooded areas out here where you all cannot access. This level of coordination indicates just how extensive and complex the search truly was. However, despite all the manpower and planning, physical evidence remained frustratingly limited. Investigators reported only 2 small boot prints located right outside the house facing the road, believed to potentially belong to the missing children. That was all. No clear path, no trail through the woods. No indications of struggle, play, or panic. An onion bag was discovered, raising questions about whether it might have been something the children had played with. Police confirmed it was not relevant. A pink blanket was recovered but was quickly ruled out as being connected to Lily or Jack. In spite of all efforts, nothing substantial was linking the children to the surrounding wilderness. Communication also became a challenge. Officers on site swiftly realized they lacked portable reception. Radios inside vehicles functioned, but handhelds did not. One constable was directed to drive out to locate a signal strong enough to transmit the children's photos. Additionally, the TMR's trunked mobile radio system experienced technical difficulties in the command trailer. A faulty connector compelled dispatchers to summon a public safety communications team. One dispatcher confirmed that it had already been addressed. Their end wrote indicating how even the command infrastructure had begun to weaken under the pressure of the operation. Ultimately, what police discovered, or rather what they failed to discover, painted a chilling picture. Despite the best equipment and tireless professionals, and a vast area being combed repeatedly, there was no evident indication that the children had ever departed from the immediate vicinity of the house. It seemed as though they had disappeared into thin air merely a few steps from home. From the outset, the investigation into Lily and Jack's vanishing was influenced by a prevailing theory. The children had presumably wandered off independently. The tone of the initial dispatch communications mirrored this assumption. Officers were not yet treating the residence as a crime scene. They were regarding it as a point of departure. One of the first directives issued by dispatch stated, "Just ensure that Mom remains close to the house in case they happen to sneak out and return to the house." This statement suggested two implications. First, that the children might still be in the vicinity and could return at any moment. Second, that their disappearance was likely unintentional rather than criminal. Nevertheless, law enforcement did not dismiss the possibility that the children had ventured farther than anticipated. 1. Dispatcher cautioned search teams. Copy. And just for everyone's awareness, based on the profile, the children could have traveled at least 6 kilometers. So please keep that in mind. This became a pivotal point of discussion. While some investigators readied for a broad area search, others doubted whether two small children aged 4 and 6 could realistically traverse such a distance, particularly through challenging terrain. Daniel, their stepfather, was among the doubters. He consistently remarked that they dislike being wet and cold. They would immediately wish to return inside. In his opinion, the notion that Lily and Jack wandered deep into the woods was illogical. One early priority raised questions among those reviewing the dispatch logs later. Beyond monitoring for the children, officers were also advised to keep a vigilant watch on their mother. At first glance, it appears to be a precaution to ensure she was available for questioning or coordination. However, for many, it indicated that officers had concerns from the very beginning, even in the absence of direct evidence. Investigators were initiating preliminary measures to monitor the adults most closely associated with the missing children. Curiously, despite the swift mobilization of search teams and aerial units, the police opted not to activate an Amber Alert. Instead, they issued a non-intrusive alert and disseminated the children's photographs through media and social platforms. Officials provided an explanation for their decision, citing a lack of sufficient evidence to support an abduction. Meanwhile, the children's mother and stepfather were fervently advocating for the alert to be issued, contending that abduction was not merely a possibility but a likelihood. This situation highlighted a disconnect between the family's perception of events and the approach taken by law enforcement. Nevertheless, the extensive nature of the search operation indicated that authorities were not taking any risks. Helicopters, drones, K-9 units, and ground teams were promptly mobilized. Crews from across Nova Scotia and even New Brunswick participated in the effort. Their initial focus included the dense woods behind the residence, nearby cabins, hiking trails, and a network of gullies and dirt roads. Even though the police were not categorizing it as a criminal case, they were responding as if it could potentially escalate into one. The behavior of the parents further complicated the situation. Daniel was expressive, emotional, and maintained that the children could not have traveled far. In contrast, Malehya appeared composed, even somewhat detached during interviews. Some observers pointed out inconsistencies in her statements, particularly regarding the timeline and the circumstances surrounding the children's departure from the house. These mixed signals only served to complicate law enforcement's efforts to distinguish fact from speculation. They had to consider the possibility that the children were still in the vicinity against the likelihood that someone was not being truthful. Throughout those initial days, the primary challenge remained unchanged. Everything was predicated on assumptions. There were no security cameras, no eyewitnesses, no definitive timeline, and no concrete clues. The search was not directed by facts, it was guided by what might have transpired. This is a precarious starting point when two small children are involved. The children are currently unaccounted for. One of the most significant obstacles in the search for Lily and Jack Sullivan was not merely the challenging terrain. It was the issue of communication. The expansive remote area where the children vanished turned out to be a technological dead zone. Officers on the scene quickly discovered that their portable radios were without signal, which hindered real-time updates. One officer communicated, "McLaren Road 3. Go ahead." Understood. There is no portable reception in this area. However, the vehicles do function. This situation compelled many teams to depend on vehicle-based systems, which impeded coordination among units dispersed throughout wooded and mountainous regions. The absence of signal became a concern early in the operation. Officers required the ability to share images of the children with search units, but were unable to do so without a reliable connection. One dispatcher issued a direct command. Go to a location where you can obtain service and send those photos. I will return to the hotel to access the Wi-Fi, I suppose. What should have been a swift transmission evolved into a logistical setback. This delay was significant, particularly during the crucial initial hours of a child search. Compounding the difficulties was a malfunction in the trunked mobile radio system, which serves as the foundation for interagency communication. According to dispatch, we are experiencing issues repeatedly while we wait. I want to inform you that during last night's search, we encountered difficulties with our TMR communications via our command trailer. Given the extensive scale of the operation, one officer requested the deployment of a mobile communications unit, anticipating a lengthy mission. 3:55, I am going to request that a communications unit be dispatched here. There are 4 comms if this search is extended, as the teams were not operating on an hour-by-hour basis. They were preparing for a duration of days, even weeks, across the board. Radio channels functioned as live feeds, enabling ground and air units to relay their observations in real time. In the absence of cellular coverage, these updates were crucial, transforming radio chatter into a digital representation of the operation. Each team also remained flexible. This mutual adaptability ensured that no area was overlooked and no resources were squandered. Meanwhile, teams maintained a strict perimeter around the Sullivan residence, and all stations. I am currently loading a black SUV just north of the residence, and on the left side of the road. It does not seem to be a CRV, but it is a black SUV. If anyone wishes to approach and inspect that, it is just beneath the helicopter at this moment. If you all have visual, yes, we acknowledge that. There are 2 individuals who appear to be walking towards the lake ahead of the vehicle. Nevertheless, several initial leads disintegrated rapidly. A black SUV observed near a lake that was considered suspicious was determined to be unrelated. A pink blanket, a small boot print, and even an onion bag found near the home were all investigated and subsequently ruled out. Investigators were exploring every possible angle they could, but without a single piece of concrete evidence. The direction of the search remained ambiguous. Any unusual activity near the property prompted immediate alerts, demonstrating how seriously each potential lead was regarded, even when nothing resulted from it. Ultimately, as the search broadened, media management became a task in its own right. One officer confirmed rather than permit rumors to dictate public perception, the RCMP maintained a centralized information strategy that was measured, controlled, and consistent. In conclusion, while the boots on the ground undertook the arduous physical work, the foundation of the search relied significantly on radio communication, interagency coordination, and prompt responses to technical failures. Without operational systems, even the most well-prepared search teams can find themselves operating without clear guidance. By May 7th, it had been 6 full days since 6-year-old Lily and 4-year-old Jack Sullivan disappeared, in spite of one of the most comprehensive search operations in Nova Scotia's recent history complete. With helicopters, drones, search dogs, and hundreds of volunteers, police had to provide a sobering update. RCMP officers continued with the missing person investigation, engaging in discussions with family and community members to collect tips and additional information that could assist in locating the children. We have yet to receive any confirmed sightings. Not a single verified lead, no eyewitness testimonies, and no physical evidence to indicate that the children had even departed from the vicinity of their home. After nearly a week of thorough searching, the RCMP had to confront the unimaginable. During a press conference on May 7th, Staff Sergeant Curtis McKinnon officially announced that the active search efforts would be reduced. This transition represented a significant change from a full-scale, round-the-clock rescue operation to a more selective and strategic approach. Search teams would no longer be scouring the wilderness mile by mile. Instead, they would concentrate on revisiting specific areas that had already been searched, guided by current conditions and new data. As McKinnon articulated, they would return to locations that they believed warranted further examination. With improved weather and changing terrain, certain clues might become apparent that were previously obscured by rain, brush, or mud. However, this reevaluation also suggested a more somber reality. If the children had been present, rescuers felt they would have been discovered by this point. When directly questioned about the possibility of Lily and Jack still being alive, the RCMP did not soften their response. No, based on expert opinions and an analysis of the facts, including the adverse weather, the elapsed time, and their ages, the probability of their survival at this moment is exceedingly low. This was not stated lightly. Their reasoning was grounded in several factors: the children's tender age, the frigid temperatures and wet conditions, the harsh and unforgiving terrain, and the complete lack of any signs of survival. As the silence continued, the prospect of survival appeared increasingly bleak. Simultaneously, the physical and emotional strain on the search teams was becoming impossible to overlook. Amy Hansen, the ground search commander, remarked that we are exhausting our personnel. We are beginning to observe an increase in injuries over the past few days, and volunteers have been experiencing muscle cramps, dehydration, and extreme fatigue. Some individuals required assistance to be carried out of the forest. It became evident that the forest could not support the same level of effort for much longer. On that same day, police confirmed that numerous volunteer teams would be withdrawn from the field. From this moment forward, the local RCMP would take charge of any further searches, but only in response to specific leads or targeted investigative directions. The extensive blind area searches were effectively concluded. For the first time, police openly acknowledged that they were contemplating the use of cadaver dogs. Although it was not a formal decision, it represented a disconcerting admission. The focus had shifted from rescue to recovery, and hope was rapidly diminishing. Moving forward, all future searches would rely exclusively on credible information. The RCMP indicated that operations would be based on incoming information and specifics to ensure that efforts were directed towards areas that were identified as needing search attention. They were no longer functioning based on instinct or coverage grids. The emphasis was now on waiting for tips, data, or any solid information to act upon. Nevertheless, the RCMP made one last attempt to reassure the public. Despite the noticeable change in tone, searches would be conducted in more specific areas, including spaces that had already been covered by our teams. We aim to revisit these locations to enhance the likelihood of uncovering all clues. When transitioning from an active search to a scaled-back search, the probability of survival is taken into account. I want to assure you that our investigation into the missing persons continues. We are not packing up, nor are we giving up. Our investigation is extensive and will not conclude until we ascertain the whereabouts of Lily and Jack and can bring them home. We will persist in investigating and pursuing leads for as long and as diligently as necessary. This effort is aimed at maintaining public trust. However, it became evident that the mission had transformed. The initial optimism of early May had dissipated. In its stead was the gradual, systematic effort to reveal the true circumstances and to brace for the possibility that this was no longer a rescue operation but rather a recovery mission. From the very first communication, it was apparent that the operation was not solely focused on locating the children. It was also about uncovering the reality behind their disappearance. The actions of law enforcement conveyed a different narrative, one characterized by caution, suspicion, and a desire for control. One of the earliest directives issued by dispatch was clear: ensure that the mother remains close to the residence. On the surface, this appears to be a standard request, but for those acquainted with investigative procedures, it raised a red flag. Keeping a parent at the scene is not merely a matter of coordination, it is fundamentally about containment. When law enforcement is uncertain about the actual events, the initial step is often to secure the origin of the initial report. This directive was not delayed, it was issued immediately. This is significant. Within moments, another revealing decision was made. The residence at 1407 Garlock Road was being treated as a crime scene. This was not due to what was discovered, but rather due to what was absent. 2 children were reportedly missing, and law enforcement was uncertain whether they had genuinely departed the premises. Furthermore, it is known that the account provided by those within the home was ambiguous, potentially inconsistent. There were discrepancies that did not align, and investigators were already beginning to question their assumptions. A major concern was the conflicting timelines. Reports indicated both 8 a.m. and 10 a.m. as the last times the children were observed. This represents a tower discrepancy in a case where every minute is crucial. When such inconsistencies arise in the early stages of an investigation, suspicion is a natural consequence. Subsequently, there was an overwhelming response, almost excessively so. Helicopters, drones, K-9 units, and ground teams from various jurisdictions, along with a public safety communications unit, were all deployed within hours of the initial call. This was not the procedure for a few children who may have strayed into the woods. It was the protocol reserved for something more significant, something that could potentially involve foul play. By the following day, it was confirmed. In a media briefing, the RCMP announced that since Saturday, the Major Crimes Unit had been activated. They did not delay. They did not wait to see how events would unfold. Within 24 hours, they had called in the top experts, not because they had evidence of a crime, but due to their suspicions. Yet, despite the urgency, the police were operating on assumptions. No witness reported seeing the children leave. No door was noted to have opened, heard, or seen. There was no camera footage, not even clear descriptions of what the children were wearing, only conjectures based on which items were missing from the residence. In summary, the police had no verifiable proof that Lily or Jack had ever left the home. This alone was sufficient to cast doubt on every account of the story given. The search strategy mirrored this uncertainty. Initial efforts were focused closely around the property. They were not pursuing trails deep into the forest. They were repeatedly returning to the source. Then there was the silence. No Amber Alert was issued, only a discreet alert and carefully crafted press releases. The RCMP did not saturate the airwaves. They did not incite public panic. They managed the narrative because behind the scenes, they were still attempting to comprehend the nature of the case they were dealing with. The New Brunswick attempted abduction. In early spring, a disturbing incident occurred in Brunswick. A suspected child abduction was swiftly thwarted before the child could be taken far. Law enforcement responded within minutes, secured the area, and most importantly, began questioning those nearest to the scene almost immediately. Although the child was found unharmed, the case raised challenging questions regarding intent, access, and trust. At first glance, it appeared to be an isolated incident. However, when compared to the disappearance of Lily and Jack Sullivan in Pictou County, it raises further concerns. Disturbing similarities begin to emerge. Both cases involved young children who disappeared from or near their residences. Both incidents triggered extensive responses, and in both cases, the behavior of the police indicated that from the outset they were contemplating more than just a straightforward situation of children wandering off. On April 21, 2025, at approximately 5:15 p.m., an attempted abduction occurred in the tranquil rural area of Henderson Settlement, situated along Route 710. In New Brunswick, Canada, the victim was a child riding their bicycle alone along the road when two adults in a vehicle approached and attempted to entice the child by offering candy. Fortunately, the child had the presence of mind to flee to a neighbor's house for assistance, avoiding what could have been a significantly more tragic outcome. The vehicle involved in the attempt was described as a black four-door Subaru, possibly an Outback model. It featured tinted windows, a sunroof, and visible rust on the front passenger side bumper. Despite the detailed description, no license plate information was recorded, raising the possibility that it may have been removed, concealed, or substituted with false plates. The location, an isolated provincial road with sparse residential presence, likely facilitated the suspect's ability to act swiftly and vanish without a trace. The driver was described as a woman with light-colored, shoulder-length curly hair. No details were available regarding her clothing or height. The passenger was a man estimated to be in his early to mid-30s with a muscular build, curly hair, and a goatee without a mustache. At the time, he was observed wearing blue sunglasses and a green t-shirt with yellow accents. A composite sketch of the male passenger was publicly released by the RCMP, underscoring the seriousness with which law enforcement is addressing the incident. The New Brunswick RCMP responded promptly by issuing the suspect sketch and appealing to the public for assistance. They urged anyone who recognized the individuals or the vehicle to reach out to Sussex RCMP. The publication of the sketch, accompanied by detailed descriptions of both suspects and their vehicle, strongly indicates that the police view this as more than a misunderstanding or a singular encounter. It is being treated as a deliberate, organized effort to abduct a child. One particularly unsettling aspect of this case is the evident coordination between the two suspects. The woman seems to have assumed the role of bait, attempting to establish trust or lower the child's defenses by offering candy, while the man stood ready to intervene. This type of coordinated strategy suggests a duo operating with a defined plan rather than a spontaneous or opportunistic event. Although no direct connection has been established to other cases, the tactics and dynamics of the suspects in this incident bear a disquieting resemblance to another attempted abduction in the same province just a month later. That incident, which involved multiple suspects and occurred in another remote location, adds credibility to the theory that a mobile organized group may be targeting children across eastern Canada, especially in the absence of concrete leads such as license plates or known identities. The New Brunswick RCMP continues to depend heavily on public vigilance and information. While no child was taken that day, the nature of the attempt and how close it came has left a lasting impact on a quiet community and raised pressing questions about predator activity in rural areas. The similarities, when you plot both incidents on a map, April's attempted abduction in Henderson Settlement, New Brunswick, and the Sullivan children's disappearance in Pica County, Nova Scotia, you will notice something chilling. These two crime scenes are merely a 4-hour drive apart, connected by collector highways that quietly wind through Canada's rural east, almost tailor-made for someone attempting to move quickly and vanish even faster. Both locations are secluded, heavily wooded, and sparsely populated. In the case of the Sullivan children, they disappeared from Gearlock Road, an unmonitored rural area encircled by thick trees and nearly devoid of public infrastructure. Similarly, the child who was targeted in New Brunswick had been cycling on Route 710, a comparably desolate road in the Henderson settlement. There was no CCTV, no witnesses, and no cell coverage in many regions. Both locations are such that one could stop a vehicle, seize a child, and vanish before anyone even becomes aware. There is another aspect to consider. These are not merely random country roads. They are situated along secondary routes that connect directly to major highways. This is significant. It implies that an individual with a plan could enter silently execute their act and merge onto a main highway within minutes, crossing into another jurisdiction before an Amber Alert is even initiated. In the Sullivan case, the RCMP issued a public request for dashcam and trail cam footage from April 28 to May 2, specifically seeking footage along Gerlach Road, indicating it may have been a corridor of interest. Moreover, in both investigations, a dark-colored SUV was reported in New Brunswick, a black Subaru Outback with tinted windows and rust on the bumper. In Nova Scotia, early dispatch audio highlighted a suspicious black vehicle near the scene. Whether or not it is the same car, the pattern of movement is unmistakable. Both locations are prime targets for a predator who comprehends the terrain, who selects isolation, and who depends on time gaps between action and reaction. If someone is traversing the eastern provinces in search of opportunities, these roads, these areas provide precisely what a hunter requires: quick access, low visibility, and an escape route. And that detail may be the most perilous of all. Alongside the location, timeline, and an examination of the psychology behind both acts, a troubling pattern becomes apparent. Let us begin with the selection of victims. In both instances, the children targeted were very young, preschool to early elementary school age. In New Brunswick, the child, who was approached while riding a bicycle, was clearly small and vulnerable. In Nova Scotia, Lily was 6 years old and Jack was merely 4. These ages are not arbitrary. Children within this age group are relatively easy to manage, unlikely to resist effectively, and even less likely to give accurate accounts of their abductors if they survive. Offenders seeking a simple, low-risk target are fully aware of their actions when they select children of this young age. This indicates intent. It reflects experience. The strategies employed to approach these children also exhibit similarities. In New Brunswick, the classic lure was utilized, offering candy. This tactic has been employed by child predators for decades. However, it is not merely lazy. It is effective. Works because it exploits a child's trust and innocence. In the Sullivan case, no one observed the moment of disappearance. There was no forced entry, nor were there signs of a struggle. The dogs on the property did not bark. The children simply vanished. This conveys something significant. It implies a quiet approach, one that did not alarm them. It is possible they were familiar with the individual, or that the person had a way of appearing familiar, calm, and safe. This also necessitates psychological precision. Following the act, both cases exhibit signs of a swift, calculated escape. In the New Brunswick incident, the suspects departed the scene immediately after the child fled. Again, witnesses reported a black Subaru with rust on the bumper. In Nova Scotia, there is no footage of a vehicle leaving the Sullivan property, but a suspicious black SUV was noted in the vicinity. In both instances, the interval between the incident and the initial search provided ample opportunity for someone to escape, far from the area, particularly in rural regions with limited surveillance and open roadways. Another disconcerting similarity is the possible involvement of a female accomplice. In New Brunswick, the woman was the one who approached the child. She communicated in both English and French without an accent, likely attempting to appear trustworthy, local, and non-threatening. She was the driver of the vehicle. She assumed the role of the safe adult. In the Sullivan case, there is no direct eyewitness account of a female stranger. However, this does not necessarily imply that she was absent. In fact, AI-enhanced analysis of video footage and still images taken from a distance has identified the presence of an unidentified woman near the Gerlach area at the time of the disappearance. Her identity remains unverified. She was never found and no public alert was issued. If we apply the same model as in New Brunswick, it is plausible that a woman was involved in initiating contact. There were no screams nor any indications of panic. The children did not appear to have fled. Such compliance is often achieved through familiarity or manipulation, and statistically, women are more frequently utilized in child-luring scenarios for this precise reason. Both incidents also suggest a significant level of planning. These were not chaotic, disorganized crimes. Both took place in remote locations, far from surveillance cameras and out of public sight. In the Sullivan case, there were discrepancies in parental accounts. No one could definitively state what the children were wearing. No external witnesses could confirm the last time they were seen alive. These gaps raise important questions. Were those details genuinely forgotten or intentionally obscured? Was there an opportunity to clean up or stage the scene? One theory worth exploring is that we are dealing with a mobile predator. One or more individuals traveling between provinces, targeting isolated communities where children are less safeguarded and neighborhoods are less vigilant. A black SUV, a couple, a pattern of swift action, no evidence left behind, and calculated silence. It would not be the first instance of a serial predator utilizing interprovincial routes to evade detection. Ultimately, the most significant parallel may lie in the motive or lack thereof. Nothing was taken. No homes were ransacked. The focus in both cases was exclusively on the child. This indicates one thing: control. Not chaos, not impulse, but obsession. The type of behavior we observe in offenders with personality disorders or deeply entrenched fixations on child dominance, submission, or worse. In conclusion, when examining the details from both cases, the similarities are numerous and too specific to overlook. Firstly, consider the timing. The attempted abduction in New Brunswick occurred on April 21, 2025, while the Sullivan children disappeared on May 2, merely 11 days later. Both events transpired in the late afternoon when surveillance was minimal and foot traffic was low. Additionally, in both instances, there was a significant delay between the moment the children went missing and the initiation of a full-scale response, providing any perpetrator ample opportunity to flee the area, even crossing provincial boundaries. Furthermore, there is the aspect of geography. Both incidents unfolded in secluded wooded communities, discreetly located off collector highways, roads that connect small areas directly to major routes. These types of locations facilitate quick actions and allow someone to disappear without a trace. The black Subaru observed in New Brunswick exemplifies this calculated movement. It is a generic, hard-to-track vehicle with sufficient space for action and transport and just anonymous enough to remain unnoticed. Behaviorally, both cases resonate with the same chilling themes. The victims were children aged 4 to 6, an age group particularly vulnerable to exploitation, possessing limited capacity to resist or articulate their experiences. In both scenarios, the children were approached or taken in private, unsupervised environments, far removed from cameras or witnesses. The actions were discreet, precise, and left no signs of forced entry, violence, or theft, just children missing. Even the nature of the attacks raises concerns. Both cases imply the involvement of two offenders, potentially a male and a female. In New Brunswick, the woman initiated contact. In the Sullivan case, the method of disappearance was executed so flawlessly that it indicates a similar psychological strategy, suggesting someone capable of gaining trust, lowering defenses, and quietly leading a child away. This points to experience, possibly indicating teamwork. Lastly, there is the behavior of the RCMP. In the Sullivan case, investigators sought footage dating back to April 28. For days prior to the children being reported missing. Why? Because they are likely contemplating a broader timeline and perhaps a more extensive operation. They have not explicitly stated it, but the timeline coincides precisely with the aftermath of the New Brunswick case. If the same individuals are involved, then the pattern is alarming. A first attempt that was unsuccessful, when the child escaped. Then a second, more sophisticated assault, quiet, controlled, and still unresolved. A predator or predators who are evolving as they proceed. However, if the two cases are not connected, if we are facing two distinct perpetrators, both targeting young children in rural Eastern Canada within a span of 2 weeks, then something even more terrifying is occurring. It indicates that these are not isolated events. It suggests multiple offenders may be operating in the same area simultaneously, employing eerily similar tactics. Regardless, the public and the RCMP must remain vigilant, because when children disappear so smoothly, so quietly, and no one is apprehended, something is amiss, and it will not end here. Update and announcement. Regarding the official investigation update, the Nova Scotia RCMP has confirmed that the disappearance of Lily and Jack Sullivan is being regarded as a high-priority missing persons investigation. Authorities have stressed that this is not a standard case. It is an intensive, highly coordinated initiative involving a wide array of specialized teams and resources. The objective is straightforward yet critical: to determine what transpired with the two young children and to ensure their safe return. More than 11 RCMP units from across Nova Scotia are presently engaged in the investigation. These include the Northeast Nova RCMP Major Crime Unit, Picou County District RCMP, and Digital Forensic Services. Teams with specific expertise have also been enlisted, such as the Truth Verification Section, which manages polygraph testing, as well as the Police Dog Services Underwater Recovery Team, Behavioral Sciences Group, Criminal Analysis Service, and the Legal Application Support Team. The early suspicion from the RCMP remains unexplained. Stranger abduction, which may be part of a pattern linked to other unsuccessful kidnappings in New Brunswick, is a theory that is gaining traction, suggesting the possibility of involvement from someone close. It is perhaps even more likely that a trusted individual is implicated. At this juncture, the issue is not whether the children wandered off. The real question is who abducted them and for what reason. Ultimately, this case serves as a reminder of how fragile our assumptions can be. From an external perspective, it appeared to be a straightforward missing person report involving two young children who may have accidentally exited a door and wandered into the woods. However, as more details emerged, the reality became increasingly intricate, more disturbing, and significantly less certain. The RCMP has committed substantial resources to this case, including search and rescue teams, K-9 units, drones, aerial surveillance, and a complete mobilization of their major crime division. The effort was extensive, resolute, and unyielding. Despite the extensive actions taken behind the scenes, the information that reached the public has frequently been slow, perplexing, and contradictory. Initial statements that minimized the likelihood of abduction appear to contradict tactical measures such as restricting the mother's movements or examining trail camera footage from days prior to the 911 call. Press conferences have raised more questions than they have answered. The absence of clear and consistent communication has created a void, and within that silence, speculation has intensified. People desire to have faith in the system. However, when it remains silent or provides insufficient information, individuals begin to seek answers elsewhere. Nevertheless, we must not overlook the commitment of those on the ground. The searchers who dedicated countless days to scouring challenging terrain. The analysts meticulously reviewing hours of footage frame by frame. The officers pursuing leads quietly, away from the public eye. Their efforts are significant. It is the kind of relentless, unseen work that often leads to resolution, sometimes long after the headlines have faded. This case remains open. The children are still unaccounted for, but hope persists. Each unanswered question serves as a motivation to continue seeking answers. However, this is not merely a local endeavor. National and interprovincial collaborators are also engaging closely with the Nova Scotia RCMP. These partners include the National Centre for Missing Persons and the Canadian Centre for Child Protection. Additional assistance is being provided by provincial and municipal police departments from various regions of Nova Scotia and even other areas of Canada. This level of cooperation underscores the gravity with which investigators are tackling the case. Every resource is being utilized. Every possibility is being examined, and, according to law enforcement, every piece of information is being meticulously assessed, prioritized, and acted upon. The investigation is ongoing and becoming more intricate with each passing day since the disappearance of Lily and Jack Sullivan. The Nova Scotia RCMP has initiated a comprehensive and systematic investigation. Their efforts have encompassed interviews, forensic analysis, extensive searches, and the gathering of digital and physical evidence, all aimed at revealing the truth. One of the initial steps involved interviewing individuals linked to the case. So far, 54 individuals have been formally interviewed by investigators. Among these, several have undergone Polygraph examinations. The RCMP has chosen not to reveal how many tests were conducted, who participated, or what the outcomes were, citing the necessity to maintain the integrity of the investigation and the confidentiality of those involved. Nevertheless, CTV policing expert Chris Lewis pointed out that polygraph tests are not usually administered to bystanders or low-level witnesses. Rather, they are reserved for individuals whom police suspect may be involved or are withholding information. In addition to witness interviews, the RCMP has processed a considerable amount of digital evidence. To date, they have received 488 tips from the public, many of which have been evaluated and pursued. Investigators have also gathered hundreds of video surveillance, especially from Gerald Road between 12:50 p.m. on April 28 and 12 p.m. on May 2, the critical time frame surrounding the children's. The disappearance has prompted the RCMP to issue a public appeal for further footage on May 28, urging anyone who may have traversed the area to come forward. To bolster these efforts, the RCMP secured multiple judicial authorizations enabling them to seize and analyze potential evidence. This has encompassed documents, digital devices, and other materials deemed pertinent to the investigation. Physical searches have also been significant. The property from which the children vanished has undergone a comprehensive search. This includes the house itself and the surrounding land, outbuildings, septic systems, wells, mine shafts, and underground culverts. Ground and aerial searches commenced almost immediately after the children were reported missing, followed by additional search operations on May 8, 9, 17, 18, 31, and June 1. The latest operation involved 78 trained searchers concentrating on the Gearlock Road area and a nearby pipeline where a boot print had previously been discovered. Despite these extensive efforts, the RCMP reports that no new search areas have been identified thus far. Nevertheless, they persist in pursuing every lead and scrutinizing every piece of information with the aim of locating Lily and Jack and comprehending the circumstances surrounding their disappearance. From the beginning, while no suspects have been publicly identified and no individual has been designated as a person of interest, the case remains classified as suspicious until proven otherwise. Authorities continue to stress that they are not ruling out any possibilities. Although they have maintained confidentiality regarding the specifics, the RCMP's implementation of polygraph testing and the engagement of advanced investigative units, such as behavioral science experts and digital forensics teams, indicate that certain individuals may be under internal examination. These measures are not standard procedures, they represent a concentrated effort to validate information and eliminate deception during interviews. In a formal statement, Staff Sergeant Rob McSinon emphasized the agency's dedication to a comprehensive and adaptable investigative approach, possibly by an unknown individual or perhaps by someone familiar to them. One scenario that is garnering significant attention is the possibility that Lily and Jack were abducted by a stranger. In the weeks leading up to their disappearance, there were 2 attempted kidnappings in the vicinity of New Brunswick, both occurring in rural settings and both involving suspicious persons targeting vulnerable individuals. Although the RCMP have not officially connected these cases, the timing, methods, and geographical closeness raise substantial concerns. Even more alarming, an unidentified black SUV was spotted near Gearlock Road shortly before Lily and Jack disappeared. Could these events be related? A pattern emerges. A predator traversing provinces unnoticed until it is too late. However, there is also another possibility, one that is more difficult to discuss. The children may have been taken by someone familiar, someone within the household. The RCMP's choice to request trail camera footage starting on April 27, 5 full days prior to the 911 call, indicates they suspect the disappearance may have occurred earlier than reported. The last confirmed sighting of the children was on April 29 when the school bus dropped them off. After that, it is solely the parents' account. Their mother, Malehya, asserted that Lily had a cough and kept them home on May 1 and 2. However, if the children were already missing before that, then everything else unravels. Daniel Martell, the mother's partner, stated he spent 2 hours driving the back roads searching for the children. Yet his boots remained clean. No one captured him on camera. K9 units failed to detect any scent on those roads. These details raise more questions than they resolve. Additionally, there is another detail to consider. Daniel's mother reportedly resides in an RV nearby with pets. What did she observe? Was she interrogated? Why has her role, however minor, not been clarified? All theories remain technically viable, but the weight of the evidence is shifting. The wandering theory is becoming increasingly difficult to uphold. It does not account for the silence. It does not explain the complete absence of physical evidence. Strategy. He stated that all scenarios are being taken into account and we have utilized every tool and resource available to us. Echoing this sentiment, Corporal Sandy Madaru, who is leading the investigation for the Northeast Nova RCMP Major Crime Unit, emphasized the team's disciplined methodology. We adopt a highly coordinated and intentional approach to ensure that nothing is overlooked. Collectively, these statements reinforce a central message: the RCMP is resolute in its pursuit of the truth. Regardless of the time required or the direction in which the evidence may lead, every theory remains under consideration. Every detail is being scrutinized. Until the fate of Lily and Jack is determined, the investigation continues to be very much active. Remaining theory. Initially, many believed that Lily and Jack Sullivan had merely wandered off. Two children, aged 4 and 6, residing in a rural trailer adjacent to dense woods. It was a plausible theory to accept. However, from the outset, the RCMP did not perceive it in that manner. They indicated that authorities were approaching this case as something beyond a simple missing person report. Even more revealing, no one, neither a neighbor nor a passerby, saw the children exit the house. The narrative that they quietly slipped out through the sliding door does not hold when no one can confirm their presence outside. What truly undermines the wandering theory is the total lack of physical evidence. Over 160 searchers, drones, helicopters, and canine units scoured the area for days. Not a single footprint, no scent, no pieces of clothing, no sounds, nothing. The terrain itself was harsh. Fallen trees, dense underbrush, and uneven ground. Even adults would find it challenging to navigate, let alone children of such a young age. Search expert Robert Coors notes that 95% of children aged 4 to 6 who wander are located within 6.6 kilometers, and 98% of them are alive if found within 24 hours. Lily and Jack have been missing for over 3 weeks. If they were ever in those woods, there should be some evidence, anything, to substantiate it. Yet, there is none. This leads us to what is now the prevailing theory: abduction. Every moment of silence serves as a prompt to listen more intently. And every flicker of uncertainty compels us to continue our search for Lily and Jack. We persist in our quest for the truth because someone possesses knowledge of what transpired. Until we uncover that truth ourselves, we will not cease our efforts. As we observe and await developments, it is astonishing to comprehend that between 70,000 and 80,000 Canadians are reported missing annually. This figure is not decreasing, it is on the rise. Yet, despite the staggering numbers, 88% of those reported missing are located within the first week. That equates to nearly 9 out of 10. However, this does not apply to Lily and Jack. These two young children, aged 4 and 6, appear to have disappeared as if their presence dissipated like breath in the cold morning air. There are no signs, no movements, and no errors in the search efforts. This is the most chilling aspect, as every individual, every body, every child leaves behind some evidence. This is not mere speculation, it is a biological fact. Therefore, if no evidence exists, it implies that someone has intervened. Whatever vow of silence that individual or individuals have taken, they are clinging to it resolutely. Currently, 509 Canadian families akin to the Sullivans are still in a state of waiting, still engaged in prayer, still pleading for clarity, and still holding on to the hope that perhaps someone witnessed something and may come forward. If only one person is aware of the truth, they might carry that secret to their grave. However, if 2 or more individuals were involved, will one of them divulge information for a substantial reward or due to a guilty conscience? In the past, individuals would discuss rumors and hypothetical scenarios in local cafes and corner stores. Today, social media has emerged as the modern-day community gathering place. We are more interconnected than ever, yet we find ourselves increasingly desperate for answers. While we may not be able to assist directly, it is imperative that we express ourselves, share our thoughts, and maintain the pressure, for unchecked silence shields the wrong individuals. Therefore, in honor of Lily and Jack Sullivan, and for every family still in waiting, we refuse to remain silent. However, as we navigate this narrative, piece by piece, clue by clue, we must pause and reflect. Is this pursuit worthwhile? In chasing cases like this, where answers are scarce and time relentlessly progresses, does it truly hold significance? And if it occurs, what role do we assume in that endeavor? We are not detectives. We are not forensic specialists. We are merely individuals. Yet, perhaps that is precisely the point, for individuals communicate, individuals share, individuals remember, and occasionally it is the person outside the system, the neighbor, the friend, the stranger on the internet, who possesses the crucial piece of information. Thus, the fundamental question may be, what actions can we take? We can remain vocal. We can maintain our curiosity. We can ensure their names do not fade from memory. And we can remind society that Lily and Jack are significant even if we have never encountered them. There exists another question, one that quietly persists in the background of every unresolved case, particularly ones such as this. When do we cease? When do we, as outsiders, as observers, as strangers, determine it is time to move forward? When do we conclude that perhaps it is too late? This is not a straightforward question to confront. The reality is that most missing persons cases grow cold. Leads diminish. Individuals cease to communicate. Even the news cycle progresses. Families, those left behind, are frequently anticipated to find a way to cope with the uncertainty. But is that the essence of justice? Is that what these children merit? The answer is not straightforward. Perhaps there is no ideal moment. However, it may ultimately hinge on this. We cease only when we are confident that we have exhausted every possible effort. When no lead remains unpursued. When every silence has been interrogated. Until that point, we owe it to them to persist.